Edward Weston was my grandfather. He lived in this house when he was there. He actually built the house for me. I got to know him better when I got older and had a chance to live with my father in the darkroom with Edward's negatives. So that was my connection to Edward. Was actually living through his negatives, helping my father print them. I couldn't believe when I'd go over to a friend's house that they didn't have darkroom. When I grew up, we had darkrooms, and you don't really think, that this is anything special. You go out on photography trips, you take your cameras. We lived actually quite a ways down the coast and it was very isolated, so didn't get into town much. So yeah, to me it was a very natural thing to go into the darkroom. Edward had a lot of friends, and that was, growing up, was very intriguing to me because I knew he had spent time in Mexico. And he had friends like Diego Rivera, Orozco. Of course, he went there with Tina Modote. So to me, that was a very romantic, in Mexico, and all these famous painters and sculptors. And I really, and I would see the images. I was printing with my dad, helping him in the darkroom, printing portraits of Diego Rivera, Orozco, and of course the great nudes of Tina. The guest book is a fascinating document of people that came and visited Edward here at the house. It was a real treasure to have it at the house and see all the people that came through. Very famous people, architects, painters, of course also his friends, like Ansel Adams. I think he signed it 3 or 4 times. And of course my father signed it, so there's this long history of names of people that visited him while he lived here. Edward really never sold a lot of work. He died a relatively monetarily poor man. His legacy lives on through his being as a photographer and all the respect that he got from actually bringing black and white photography to an art form. I don't think he ever sold a print for more than $35. His prints now, original prints, done by him, one sold for $1.6 million. I think he would be quite shocked at that, And you look at the house here; it's very humble, very simple house. He did what he loved to do. He loved to photograph, and as you see in his darkroom and stuff, how simple it is and how basic it is. That's how he lived his life. He was driven up to this area in Carmel, I think, because of the rich history of the different artists that were living here. He had met Ansel Adams up in San Francisco. He knew that Adams had a house down here in Carmel. And so he gravitated to this area. And of course, his favorite spot is Point Lobos, which really drew him to photograph there. I think what Point Lobos meant to Edward was a place to go and photograph very close to his house. Edward never drove, so he could actually walk from here to Point Lobos, which he did frequently. And it's funny that Edward wasn't the first Weston to photograph at Point Lobos. Brett was. And Edward was visiting Ansel Adams up in Yosemite. And Brett had a friend that said, "Hey, I'm going to take you to this spot called Point Lobos." And Brett went in there and just went crazy. Because a lot of people think it was Edward that was the first Weston. No, it was Brett. Brett, who had a little studio in Carmel, Brett came down while his dad was still up in Yosemite, took all of Edward's photographs off the wall, put all his new Point Lobos photographs up on the wall, and waited for his father to come home. And they had such a wonderful relationship. There wasn't any jealousy or Edward wasn't mad that he had taken the Edward's photographs down. He just looked at the photographs and said, "Brett, you have to take me to this spot." And that's how Edward got to Point Lobos. Edward photographed at Point Lobos his whole life. In fact, his last photograph he ever took was at Point Lobos. So it was a continuing canvas for him to work with, constantly changing. A lot of times when he got older, he got sick with Parkinson's. He would still go out there. He would still photograph. The last photograph he took, he was with a group, a workshop, and I forget who was teaching it. And a student asked him, he said, "Mr. Weston, what do I photograph?" And he said to the student, and Edward had his camera there, he said, "You should be able to look at your feet and find a photograph." And he tilted the camera down and shot the last photograph he ever did of these rocks just below his feet. I grew up in a family that's all they did, is they photographed, and you become what a lot of your surroundings is. So at 6 years old, I pick up a camera, and being basically a very shy kid, loved to spend hours in the darkroom. And I'd go in there and help my dad. And it was a darkroom we had down in Garrapatta. And it had this big door on it, and you'd open up the door. And then there was this large army tarpaulin that you had to work your way through. And it always smelled like hypo, and it was this dark, dank little darkroom. And I loved it. I'd sit on the chair there and help my dad run the negatives through the fixer. And I always felt very lucky because I knew from that age of 6 years old, this is what I wanted to do. Black and white is very simple to do. Color at that time was very complicated. Usually would have to send it out to a lab, it was a dye transfer. When Cibachrome came around, it was a process you could color, do color prints at home. But so for me, just economically, I just did black and white. It was very simple, and very rudimentary in its process, and never wanted to do color. It's kind of ironic now that I paint on my photographs and put color back into them. But no, it was always black and white. It was always something that I could control, It's like anything, it's a tool, and that was my passion. The darkroom is a magic place for me, and I don't think you ever get tired. And I think as a young boy, I'm watching that image come up from a blank piece of paper was so magical. I mean, I still get goosebumps just thinking about it. It's the magic of what that art form is, and oh yeah, there are days when you're in the darkroom and it's like, it's work. And it's like any profession. But there are days so many other days that you're sitting there and you've created a great negative, and now you're going to make a print, and there it is. I mean, there's your language. There's what you've worked your whole life to produce. Art can be a very selfish thing, but it can also be something that you really want to share. And when you see that image, and it's right, it's a great feeling. I found that I wanted more control over what was going into the photograph. I didn't want it to be happenstance that I would be out there and have to find something. I wanted to make something. And so I gravitated to the studio, and this is 30 some odd years ago, because it was a place that I could control what I was taking a photograph of. Not lighting and all that. I could control the visual aspects of the image. Everything in that image was mine. I primarily, actually totally do mostly all figure studies. And that was, there again, important to me because those figures represented a lot of times me. They played my part and in that photograph. It just happened to be, they would usually be a woman or mostly always women. But they could, it's a very theatrical process. So they became my muses, my people that pretended to be me in that photograph. I wanted it to be all mine. Everything that I did was mine, my control, my decision. And it totally different than what my family does or my grandfather's nudes. My grandfather's nudes much more form, and just beauty. And, there's a simplicity to them that's just stunning. Mine are much more complicated. My dad used to argue, "Oh, Kim, you're too cerebral," and I said, well, that's what I need. That fulfills my vision of my art. And that's what's so wonderful about living here at Wildcat, is that it is the home of Edward Weston, but it's also Gina and I's home and our son, Zach. And people, to them, could be Mecca. I mean, when you take people that really love photography, and especially love my grandfather, into his darkroom, I've seen grown men cry that you know, they look down at that printing frame and those tools, simple tools, and it's so moving to them to be in the place where Edward made these beautiful images. To have that and to have people be able to visit and open up the house, you know, but I love photography. It's my life, it's my passion. So the door is usually always open. Just as Edward kept a guest book, which is a wonderful document, Gina and I keep a record, especially Gina because she has to print all the prints, but we have online the people that have visited Wildcat. I mean, from Dennis Hopper to Graham Nash to high school, our local high school students. So to be able to go back and look at our website and see all those people and all the hard work it took Gina to keep that alive and running is great. It's a great part of what our history is here. The partnership between Gina and I came out of really necessity because I was a carpenter and she was a masseuse, and we were living together here at Wildcat. One day I came to her and asked her if she would run the website. You know, let's work together at this goal that we want to do. And she said yes. Having Gina take over the responsibility of running the business gives me the opportunity and the luxury, basically, to teach our workshops, meet people, and be creative all at the same time. Keep my work going and keep my love for what I do going. Wildcat Hill here, the house, like it was built, you know, for my grandfather by my uncle. I think it cost $1,000. I remember my Uncle Neil saying, it cost $1,000 to build, you know, and that included his labor. Very simple house, as you see. The desk behind me was Edward's. It was a desk that he wrote his day books on. And as you go around the room, it's an interesting mix of Gina and I and us living here. I mean, people come and they say, "Do you actually live here?" You know, because they look at this stuff and they go, "Yeah, we live here. This is our house. You know, this is our kitchen." They find it hard to grasp that we actually live in this living museum, is what I call it. And that's very important to me. I didn't want it to be a velvet rope, you know, and people could peek in and you know, it's where we live. This is my desk. This is where I write letters, you know. This is where I sit and do my work. It's not a dead thing, you know. It's going on. It's the next generation. And as you look around the room, the different things that we've collected, you know, were all things that I got from my father that pertain to the house, you know, that belonged in the house. And we kind of keep this end of the house Edward. The first thing you come through the door is this camera, which is a very similar camera to the one that Edward used in Mexico. So a lot of the stuff you're seeing is stuff that Edward had or was closely related to what he had. The desk, very important piece of history. There's a wonderful little sign that you see there. It says, "I don't lend my books to my friends. I don't want to lose my books or my friends." You know, it just shows you how important back then books were. You know, we don't see books that way anymore. You know, we see Kindles and stuff. So books to them was important. You know, this is something you didn't lend out. If you didn't, you wanted to get them back. So I love that part of this house. The image there up on the wall is a picture of Ansel and Edward together. They were great friends. Ansel just lived down the road. And what I love about the photograph is Edward was a small guy. He's 5'3". Ansel was a rather tall guy. He's up around 6 feet. And if you notice in the photograph, Ansel is bending over so he's not towering over Edward Weston, because he had such an incredible respect for Edward. And that's just in that body motion, body movement, trying not to, you know, be way above Edward. It was a great relationship they had, the two of them together. My dad photographed quite a few photographs of Edward, and so did Brett. It's what they did back then. They did portraits of each other. I particularly like that one because Edward is not too sick at the time. You know, he's still in good health. And the one below it is actually the only negative that I own that my father gave to me. It's an original negative. It's a picture of Karis looking through that window from the outside. And Dad gave it to me because it was unique to this house. You know, it's Karas, the house. The chair, I mean, it's such a simple little piece of furniture, but it means a lot because this was Edward's chair, so this is actually where he sat. The family portrait you're seeing on the wall up there was actually a present from Uncle Brett to Gina. Family is very important to her, and so this was a portrait of the whole family. There's Edward, there's my dad, there's Flora, there's Neil, there's Chan, and there's Brett. And if you look closely at it, Brett's actually taking the photograph. You look in his hand, you can see he has the bulb. And he's also the only one that knows when the shutter's going to go off. So everyone else is looking straight at the camera. And Brett is turned to the side to give his good profile, you know. That one you're seeing up there is pepper number 30. Why it's called that is because it was the 30th pepper he ever photographed. And I think he did a total of 37. This became one of the most iconic images of his work. I think a lot of people saw it like two people embracing. You know, I think he just saw it as a beautiful form, you know. A lot of times what people comment about art says more about them than what the artist was actually thinking. But a portrait done of Tina down in Mexico. And it was done with a smaller camera, the Graflex camera. And he did a whole series of wonderful portraits. All of them not retouched in any way. It was very straightforward photography. This camera enabled him, the Graflex, to be able to look through the lens as he was taking the photograph. Most view cameras, of course, when the film's in, you can't look through it. So this gave him a flexibility that he could really, and this is great, is she's reciting poetry. So she's in front of him reciting this poem, and he's photographing her. So it's a series of, and this is one of the series. The photograph here that you see is actually a photograph of Karas. And there, if you look closely, you can see the chair in the background that I'm sitting on. But that was done right here at the house. And that was done by George Horrell, the famous Hollywood photographer, who was the first person to sign the guest book. The Nautilus shell is done in 1927. It became a stamp, actually. They did a stamp out of that one. But there again, that was a study. And what's interesting about working with that, every time you try something new, you come up against a problem. The problem with 8x10 is the closer you get to the subject matter, the less your depth of field is. So normally a lens would stop down to f64. Well, he was so close to his subject matter that f64 would not bring it all into focus. So he had special stops made for him to stop it down to 240. So most of those images, the pepper, the shells, are all anywhere from 6 to 8 hour exposures. Because basically what he built was a pinhole camera. If you ever played with a pinhole camera, it has infinite depth of field. And so, but also very little light comes through. So that is a 6 to 8 hour exposure. As Pepper 30 is sort of his iconic still life, the nude that you're looking at there is his iconic nude, and that's 227N. And you may wonder, why does he call them these names? Well, those are codes that are written on the back. That was the 227th nude that he ever did. And that's Karas. And it's so funny, when she was alive and she was in this house, she would talk about that photograph and her reaction to it and Edward's reaction to it. And her reaction to it was she didn't like the bobby pins in the hair. And Edward's reaction to it was he didn't like the shadow. And first thing, when you look at that image, I never saw the bobby pins until she mentioned it. And the shadow, it doesn't bother me at all. But it's interesting when, you have such a incredibly, you think of Edward Weston, you think of that image. And then you hear their little stories. What I love about Edward's Darkroom, and I bring a lot of students in there, some students that have never done analog, they've done digital their whole life. And what impressed me about it is how simple it is. How one single light bulb, one printing frame, one piece of paper, and 3 chemistry trays. That's all he used. Very, very simple. And what it goes to show is the importance of, and especially in photography, surface. What a surface can do, and how that is part of your language. And to me, the less you clutter up, getting that surface correct and getting it right, the better off I am. I'm just that type of person. So you sit and look in his, you stand in his darkroom and you'll see a 3-minute egg timer. Well, that was his timing for developing. You know, so simple. I've had people go in Edward's darkroom and literally you can watch it on their face. I mean, it's like, oh my God, you know, this is so wonderfully simple, so wonderfully not about the technical aspects of it. It's about what came from this man's heart and how little amount of tools that he needed to express himself and express himself in such a strong and wonderful manner. Gina and I run workshops here at Wildcat. To us, it seemed like just a natural. You know, Edward used to do workshops here. He wasn't as big in workshops as my father was, but to run workshops here, first of all, is our location is so unique. I mean, to come to Wildcat, you know, Edward's home, and photograph nudes. I mean, we do a nude workshop here, which we fill pretty much every time. And the people get to work here in the house, you know, get to work outside. And we spend 3 days together, you know, photographing. And this is where I love the technical part of digital photography can come in, because we only have a short amount of time. The people that are shooting digital, the great thing about it is we can look at their work, you know, put it up on the monitor and I can critique it. You know, at my school, you know, I'd have to go out there, soup the negatives, you know, make proof sheets and make contacts. Where the digital, it's such a wonderful tool to be able to instantly, especially with students, show them what they might be doing wrong. We do a multitude of other workshops. We do a mission workshop. I do landscape workshops. We also travel and do workshops. So you keep on having to mix it up, you know. Yes, you do have groupies that will follow you, you know, and come to a lot of your workshops. And for me too, I want to do, you know, not that I'm a mission type guy, you know, I don't do that normally, but it gets me out of my comfort zone. You know, I'm really good with a figure and it's a natural thing for me to do. So it's fun to sort of press that envelope and go with the students to a mission. You know, we get great access. We have archaeologists on site, and we get to go to places in the mission that no one else can go. It's a unique experience, and the California missions are such a huge part of the history of California. One of my favorites is the tutorials, and that's a one-on-one experience. I love the group workshops. It's a different dynamics, but the one-on-one gives me an opportunity to spend 1 day or 2 days with the student working on whatever they want. I mean, whatever I have to offer. If it's with a nude, or if it's platinum printing, or you know, if it's landscape, I'm very flexible. I can move around and do pretty much anything. Point Lobos to me is a family graveyard. I mean, they're all buried there. I mean, they're not buried, but they're scattered. Their ashes are scattered there. I photographed there a lot when I was young. You know, it's just what you did. I still will go there and photograph, you know, just there again, getting out of my comfort zone, getting out of the figure. I take workshops there, show them places that Edward photographed. It's a very, it's a very familiar place. It's like an old book. You know, when we went down the other day with you guys and we went to Weston Beach, you know how many times I've been there? It's so wonderful, and it's all the rocks, you know, and I still couldn't help not get Gina's iPhone camera and take a picture, because it is a stunning place, and you see why my family always returned there. Even Brett, you know, he would always say, you know, I've been here 100,000 times, you know, but I always bring my camera. And it's a unique place, and it's stamped, you know, with the history of my grandfather and my family. Today, what we know as Weston Beach, when I was young, was called Pebbly Beach. And because it was such a significant place that my grandfather photographed, that Ansel Adams and my dad got together with the Park Service, and they actually changed the name to Weston Beach, and that's what it's called today. The camaraderie of artists, I think, has always been here. And it's funny, you look at Carmel now, and it's definitely changed. It's changed since I was a kid, you know. It used to have gas stations on the 4 corners. And you sort of may think that this has gone away, that this artist community is sort of succumbed to the commercialization of Carmel. It really haven't. There's an incredible groups of photographers and painters and poets and that still exist and still come over to this house. I mean, it's amazing. You just have to peel back the layers a little bit and nothing has really changed. But friendships, you know, like my friendship with John, you know, I've known him for forever, and, you know, Hunter Witherall and all these other photographer friends that I have. It's very unique, and that goes back, I think, to what we were talking about earlier about what drew Edward here. I think a lot was that. Other people doing the similar type of creative work, the similar type of excitement in the work that we're all doing together. The importance of the print or the final product in photography is kind of unique in any other kind of discipline that you do. Because of the surface is so one-dimensional, it has to be of paramount importance. It has to bring life to the image. Paper is so important in that process, and to find a paper that speaks to you, I look at it as a language. If you put, let's say, photography or the art of photography as heart and soul, the heart would be the preparation and the ideas and how you come up with it. The soul is going to be the tools. It's going to be the surface of the paper. It's going to be your developer. It's going to be your negative. Those are the souls of the language that you're trying to say or trying to speak. I see art as a language, and we all speak that language differently. So my tools, in order for you to understand how I'm speaking or what my language is a consistency and a clarity in the tools. The Print of the Month Club actually was not a unique idea to Gina and I. My grandfather came up with it. And he sort of based it on the Book of the Month Club, because I think that had just come out. And he thought this is a great way of marketing his work. You did a print of the month, you'd pay, I think it was $15. You would get a print every month of his choice in the mail. You know, you get a year's worth of work. You get 12 prints. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. You know, of course, his problem was reaching people. You know, you wrote postcards back then, mail them out. Well, now we have the internet and we reach thousands of people. So we can really cover a lot more people than he could. I think he did it for 5 years with not much success. I mean, it's too bad. You could have come here and bought a pepper for 15. You know, it's $1 million piece of art right now. So that appealed to me. Also, we were down in Photo LA, and I noticed that all this photography was selling for very high price. And young people had a hard time getting into that market, you know, starting to collect photography, fine art photography. So when we first started out, I think we were selling the prints for $150, but you had to buy all 12. And then at the end of the year, I would send a portfolio with a cover sheet. What defines one of my images is I don't want it to be safe. I don't for the viewer. I want to challenge each viewer, and each viewer is going to see it differently. That's very important to me. I don't care if they get it my way. I want them to get it their way. I'm always asked to describe 2 or 3 of my favorite images. And I always come up with the same answer. It's the next one I take. Because to me, it's a living process. The work that I've done before, it's like old memories. You know, I want new memories. I want new things that excite me. So the ones that excite me the most are the ones I haven't done yet. And yes, I have favorites, you know, the one of Gina and the cactus, you know, the more iconic one, Gina in the window. And there are a few other images that, you know, that sort of are pets, but seriously, it would be the next image I take. My creativity and why I keep creating is the excitement of the adventure that I'm living. So I'm not just a photographer when I pick up a photographer. $10 he paid for it.